So good morning, everyone. Join us for our weekly broadcast, 10 a.m. on Thursday morning once again. So we'll kick off the slides just in about 30 seconds a minute as people join us. But John, yeah, we've been on a bit of a journey on these, and we're just talking offline a few interesting points.
There's a couple of things. One is for those watching the YouTube broadcast. So it's obviously not Thursday. It's obviously not 10 a.m. Because you watch it whenever you watch it. Second is it may be quite a bit difference in time from when it was recorded to when you watched it. And one of the things I was just thinking about to say to David is we started recording these during the first lockdown, and there was a bit of providing some updates of what's going on, Leo crowdfunding and Property Fortress, while we were all sort of stuck at home. And the world's moved on. We're a lot more able to move around. The pandemic's not over, but it's sort of more managed. But now we've got the situation in Ukraine, the war in Ukraine, the military action in Ukraine, however people want to spin that. But when it comes to these events, so they say the biggest military action in Europe in 80 years, basically since World War II. Which means, well, it's only 80 years ago. No, in a lifetime, that's long. And the arc of time or the arc of history, that's very short.
Yeah.
And when it comes to business planning, life planning, married, divorced, whatever else goes on in your life. But these are some of those, what they call black swan events, that they do happen and you do have to deal with them. And what are the implications to your business? What are the implications for housing? We were going to talk about emergency housing. What does that mean in this context? So there's all kinds of things that have been going on over these 2 years. It's been rather interesting.
Yeah, and at the same time, as you say, in the context of all of history, it's just normal. It's not normal. The normal cycle of business, of life, of health issues. And again, the pandemic obviously has been horrible for those who've lost their lives, but it's not the first pandemic the world has seen. It's not the first time that literally millions of people have died all over the world through different pandemics. So again, it's new to us. For those who have been through it, perhaps it's the first time we've experienced something at this level, but it's not new to history. And the same with wars. As you know, I have a military background, and it never ceases to amaze me that sometimes people have a psyche that somehow war is going to end, that we're going to get to a point in human history where there won't be any more war. Obviously, if we get there, fantastic. But I think, John, there's a degree of naiveness that, humans are humans. Humans are humans. And what drives war 2,000, 3,000 years ago was exactly the same things that drive war now. It's egos, it's territory, it's history of rivalries between nations. And that ain't going away anytime soon.
Yeah, and there's an element of when they talk about China and Chinese history, and you're at a country level negotiating, almost anything that anyone on the other side other than China or on the Chinese side is talking about is like barely a dot on a line of the Chinese history of 5,000 years. And you could apply that to maybe a few other countries that have a much longer history than, say, the United States or something, where the framing of these things is you have to think about the here and now, but you also have to think about the bigger perspective and how the things change and how human nature is. And we're going to possibly touch slightly on JVIP. JVIP as a business that looks to have failed or is failing because it's in a insolvency practitioner has been appointed, but it's some of the mistakes made feel rather classic. I did a little bit of research. I'm not an investor, but they do feel like, haven't we seen this before? Hasn't this happened before? How they make that decision, how they get into this. And with hindsight, some of these things are easy, but looking forward, they're not always so clear. And I'm trying to highlight that people need to have a bit of perspective, as David just highlighted, that humans are humans, cycle, life happens, people get into conflict, people get into alignment. So we could rant forever or riff forever if we want to use a modern term, but let's move forward.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's context is everything. Context is everything, and certainly interesting context at the minute. So, for anyone joining us for the first time, you're not one of our regulars, either on the Thursday 10 a.m. or listening to the recording on our YouTube channel. My name is David Johnson, CEO of Leo Crowdfunding. We're an equity property crowdfunding platform, and my co-host is
John Corey, Property Fortress Education. So real estate investor, 38 years, US, UK, Bradford to Hawaii.
Excellent, excellent. And our normal key topics, we do a little bit of overview in the market. We always have a special topic every week with some guests, maybe some project focus on some projects on our platform, and there's educational tips usually through our Ask John section. So first of all, unfortunately, circumstances beyond everyone's control means that the UKPA people can't be here for the emergency housing discussion. So we're just literally going to postpone that for a couple of weeks. So we really do want to return to emergency housing, which was our published topic for today. And John, rather than dealing with it,
so
we're going to.
What's interesting is, we only heard about this last night, or I only heard about this morning. So quite last minute. Sorry about that, folks. Emergency housing would have been, and probably still will be in 2 weeks, a very germane topic when it comes to like, well, what are we doing for emergency housing for people from Ukraine? How do you manage all that? And there's housing, as in the roof over someone's head for a day or two, to visa status, to how do they even get to from the location they're in to the location they're coming. So this is quite an interesting topic in the current context. And sorry, folks, that we can't cover it today, but I'm sure we'll come back to it.
Yeah, the plan is probably in about 2 or 3 weeks' time, we'll get it back into the schedule again. And as you say, John, very topical. And when we discussed affordable housing and social housing, emergency housing a few weeks ago, we had brilliant engagement from the attendees. So again, to remind everyone, if you do want to comment on anything, you put your comments into the Q&A box. We don't use the chat, so stick it into the Q&A. And always happy to hear your feedback and any comments.
And
so
for those on YouTube, they can just put comments down below. Is that correct, David?
Yes, absolutely. Whenever, yep, 100%, they can do that. Good point. So our normal property market update. And again, as we have been thinking about this whole area of affordable housing, emergency housing, social housing, etc., this was what was selected for today. So it's just a little bit of discussion, John, around the situation in London, specifically on affordable housing. So it was reported recently that the current sort of build rate of affordable housing is at the lowest it's been since 2017. So the crisis seems to get bigger. The need is rising, and yet the addressing of that need seems to have been slowing down. So I don't know if you have any ideas why that is specifically, or is it just the nature of the cycles of being able to implement policy and implement ideas?
Well, that's an interesting phrase, implement policy. So anybody can create a policy. My understanding, I have a bit of exposure, but I'm not an expert. My understanding is almost all the affordable houses are built off the back of normal retail priced housing. That developers are essentially taxed, which means the end buyers, the homeowners or whoever buys them in the end, is paying a premium price to cover the cost of building some of the units that are then handed over to a housing association or somehow made available on an affordable basis. There's a little bit of housing associations being able to raise their own money, but again, the more successful housing associations tend to do that by building private housing, which gets sold off or rented out or something, and that cross subsidizes the affordable. So the policy is just that. It's a wish list, it's a regulatory framework, but the ability to build is down to the overall economy. And right now we've had trouble with supply chains, we've had trouble with workers and lockdowns. And even though the construction is largely exempt from all of that, it still affects the deliveries, it still affects availability of labor or the work practices. You've seen shifts in demand of housing outside of London, say, into larger homes further out where people can work from home and all the rest, rather than city center flats, which then slows down or reduces the number of city center flats being built. You'd have to peel the data back, but this is affordable housing is part of a bigger ecosystem, and the ecosystem is turbulent right now with all the pandemic things and a bit of the Brexit things.
Yeah. So, excuse my ignorance of the makeup of the London council areas. City Hall. I don't know if you, John, you'll answer this, or if anyone, the attendees,
Mhm.
can stick it into the Q&A. Does City Hall refer to one area, or is that the conglomeration of all the different council areas in London?
So
I
it's,
guess it's not.
I can address it. First of all, I live walking distance of City Hall. So City Hall and the mayor is basically by Tower Bridge. It's the conglomeration of all the councils and housing of
Okay.
London, Greater London.
Yeah.
So the
Okay.
Greater London, there's like Greater London policy. So you have national framework for housing, the national policy. Then you come down to the Greater London area, which the mayor has influence over. Then you come down to the council level. I happen to live in Southwark, which is also where the City Hall is. So a lot of the decisions for planning, a lot of the decisions are made inside of a council, but they have to meet the Greater London Plan, which largely is driven through the office of the City Hall or the office of the mayor. And the data tends to look at the aggregate of all the London boroughs. There's 34 of them, I think, somewhere between 32 and 36, but I think it's 34. And they do have sort of an overall city perspective, somewhat similar to Manchester now. Manchester has a mayor, they have a certain pan Manchester, all the councils of the greater metro area, that whatever that's defined to be, then have a bit of a, this is the Manchester City Hall policies and things like that.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, because I was looking at those figures. Work began only 272, which, given the size of London,
it's a tiny number.
It's not going to make much impact on the affordable housing availability in London. But I suppose what this article
we need every single one being that they can build, but at the same time, 272 in a year is nothing.
Yeah, it's hard. It's pretty scratching the surface. So again, part of the criticism seems to be, and we'll not get into party politics here, but it seems that the mayor was given 4.82 billion back in 2016, and here we are in 2022, and it seems it's been very, very slow at that actually turning into houses. No doubt, the pandemic has perhaps influenced that, but certainly there's a gap that needs to be filled, and there needs to be changes.
Yeah, and this does touch on why you end up with emergency housing requirements, but I don't know what's in the 282. I know Boris Johnson got slagged off for his social housing delivery. I know this has been an issue since the first modern day Mayor Livingston, that it's been a series of misfires, and I don't know that it lands at the foot of any one party or even at any one mayor. I think they can talk a good game about what they want to do, but this is a slightly complicated problem. We've had a housing shortage without social housing being specific, just general in the UK. I do like to joke, maybe making light of it too much, but if we have a housing shortage over 100,000 a year, and that's been over more than 10 years, maybe 15 or so since the Barker report, where are these people living? As much as we have some people on the streets, 100,000 a year, we don't have that many more every year on the street. So there's a disproportional sense to the numbers, and whether they're sofa surfing, whether people are living in cramped quarters and they're doubling up or whatever, there is some of all of that. But to really tackle these problems, you have to get to like more than just the big ambitious ideal, which is sort of what this is.
Yeah. So I go back to Belfast years ago, and families with 7, 8, 9, 10 children were living in a 2 up, 2 down in Belfast. So people survived. That was the norm. So is this 100,000 shortage every year? How much of it's just aspirational? How much of it is people who put themselves on a list because they just like their own home, but it's not, as you say, absolutely essential? They're not on the street, or they're not on someone's sofa necessarily. They could well be in their own bedroom in a house right now, but they want to have their own house, and therefore they count as someone that is one of those 100,000. So
well, there will be some on that list that are in conditions that are inappropriate.
Yes, correct.
Yeah, they're not physically on the street. Maybe a younger child, a teenage boy or a teenage girl sharing a bedroom. That's inappropriate.
Correct. And that's a good point. Actually, that's a change in society that has also then driven to that. Okay, that's thank you for that. So before we come to your Ask John for today, just for the attendees who are on today, anyone who invested in the Becontree Avenue Chadwell Heath project from PLMD. Remember, we had AJ and the team on a few times on this. So this is now, John, moved to like the final piece of the jigsaw for drawdown. The shareholder agreement went out for review by the investors, then come back with a couple of suggestions and points of clarification, and then it's now gone back out to the investors for final acceptance. So this is very near drawdown. Those that are on this and haven't moved their funds, they can move it now, go on and accept your shareholder agreement if you're happy to. But it does speak, John, to this process, and one of the benefits that it is, there's a process involved in crowdfunding, and investors do get the chance to look at the shareholder agreement, analyze it, and make sure they're happy before they actually transfer funds.
Yeah, and actually, I don't know what you meant by move their funds, but I think people need to understand this is your last opportunity to get out or to actually commit to stay in. The process for shareholder review is essentially the document goes out. As someone who's invested in a number of these, I receive a copy, a draft copy, saying, here's the proposed shareholders agreement. Do you have any questions? So I read it. And these are not short documents. They're manageable, but they are real documents, so you should read them. And if you're trying to learn how to raise money, you should be reading these by being a possible investor. Second of all, if you are an investor and you want to protect your money, this is the contract. Read the contract. So then after I read it, I submit any questions I have through the forum or some other mechanism. And then the fundraiser has the opportunity to go back to their lawyer, review the comments, review the questions. Is there a typo? Is there something unclear? Or is it just, no, that's how we want to do it. And I understand that this person doesn't like it that way, but that's how we want to do it. Then the document comes back a second time. So you get 2 opportunities to read it. And the second time is generally the final version. So maybe this whole thing is a 10 to 14 day period. And you read the second time. And if you actually now are comfortable that your money is appropriately at risk and that you're comfortable with that risk, then you hit the accept button and your money will move from your personal wallet on Leo Crowdfunding to the project wallet, and the shareholder agreement will be issued in your name. Once all the people who are going to invest have invested, then the final list of all the shareholders is issued to all the shareholders. So everybody can see each other. The FCA rather likes the fact that you would know how to talk to each other if you ever needed to. So that's this phase of the project, but this is the magic moment where you actually make a commitment, you actually push the button and the money will move and you get a shareholder agreement, or you'll decline, the money will stay where it is, and everything's good.
Yeah, and I like the fact that it's a standardized process, that every investor is following the same process. There's not like private conversations with certain investors happening or anything like that. It's like this is the cookie cutter shareholder agreement. It's obviously gone back and forward between the fundraiser and their lawyers. It's their document. This is a relationship between the investors and the fundraiser. The platform is simply facilitating that transaction. It's a nice, robust method of allowing investors to review the legal document, have the input if they feel they need clarification or they're not happy about something. If the fundraiser chooses to make changes, great. If they say, actually, no, what we're offering is what it is, then investors can decide to complete their investment or not. So, so again, if anyone has invested in Becontree, we're really excited by this project because it's a sort of a different project than we've done before in terms of income. The project's built, it's already rented, and the model allows for if you like an income on a quarterly basis, projected obviously with this project. So yeah, get on and review it and make your investment if you so wish to. So John, in terms of Ask John today, this is probably a timely question. I think you alluded to JVIP earlier, and I suppose that's now been talked about quite heavily in among the forums and the property community, and this whole idea of security of investment, what it is and what it's not. So the question is, as an investor, should I always look for security or PGs on my investment? So over to you initially.
So for quick answers, the fast answer is no. And there's two reasons. One is some deals, that's not how it's going to be set up, in that security tends to mean a charge on a property. If you're investing in equity, you cannot be given a charge. You're making an equity investment. You're not making a loan. You have to have a loan for a charge to be possible. So as an equity investment, there wouldn't be the possibility of a charge on the property. There could be other forms of security. PG, personal guarantee, is one. Now, personal guarantee is a promise to pay or a promise to perform, or I personally am making a guarantee or saying I will stand behind. Some landlords will get a PG or guarantor from someone that says, if this tenant fails to pay, I know them, I'll make the payments for them. You can come to me. PGs are nice, maybe, but are they actually something you're gonna depend on? Are you gonna be able to go to court and make sure that it gets followed? The same with security. The FCA has written on this a bit, that for property deals, people overrate the value of a charge or value of security. They think it means their money is free of risk, free of loss. And what many people find out later is, even with the charge, or even with PGs, or even with anything else that you can think of, you still might lose money. You still will not necessarily get all of it back if things go horribly wrong. Banks, when they're doing construction loans, they know a certain percentage will go bad. Things will happen, and it may not be because of a bad deal. It could be that someone dies, the project discovers something on the site archaeologically, there's suddenly a war and there's less demand for an oil refinery, whatever the change from over the life of the project is. So you should evaluate the risk of the opportunity versus the reward. And you should look at the safety net, the skin in the game, the PG, the security agreement, what could apply, what does apply. If you have a PG and you've invested £100, are you going to hire a barrister at £10,000 to go chase your £100? So a lot of good the PG did, right? So some of this is symbolism when it comes to the practical implementation. And sometimes symbolism is good. I mean, religion is all symbolism, and it can have power, but don't assume that security or PGs mean your money's safe.
No, brilliant. You've covered that really, really well, as I knew you would. I love this topic, I think, because it really gets to the heart of property investing and the different ways to invest, which really is at the heart of why there's two different types of crowdfunding platforms and two different types of FCA licenses, because we're an equity platform. And if you invest money as equity, it's just a different way of investing money than with a charge or security on say a peer-to-peer platform, or if you happen to be doing a direct loan note and doing it legally, then that is a difference. Apples and pears. You can't compare the both. But you hit the nail on the head, I think, John, when you said risk versus reward. And sometimes I think the expectations of investors is they want the equity returns, but with the security of debt, which again is apple and pears. The reason equity tends to offer a higher projected return on investment is it doesn't come with security. It doesn't come with PGs, and therefore you're taking a bigger risk. Whereas if someone has the appetite that they really want to have every level of possible belt and braces, well, then they're possibly not going to do equity. They're going to do debt. But the PG point is a big one for me, because a lot of people look for PGs, for instance, maybe to supplement a second charge on a property, say it's ordinary development construction, and they have like comfort, and you called it symbolism. But very often the investors don't ask, well, how many other PGs does the developer actually have? So a PG might look good on paper, but there needs to be, I think, more investigation done sometimes by investors onto how many other PGs are there, what is the assets and liability, of the fundraiser. Has that actually been provided by an accountant up to date, not 2 years out of date? Because things change and people's financial circumstances change. So PGs play their play their part, but I think people need to dig more into them and make sure it's actually got some teeth behind it. Because you say, otherwise you're going to go to court to enforce a PG. If a project's gone bad or developer's gone bad, I mean, a PG is so far down the list that is it actually worth anything much?
There's all kinds of issues like that, yes, over time and how far down the list you are. It is a personal guarantee. If the person legitimately, honestly gave you a personal guarantee, but they don't have any assets left, then your PG is worthless. And you're spending bad money. Sorry, you're spending good money, chasing bad money. You know, you're going to have to take the hit. So I would suggest, particularly for equity investments, and by the way, I'll get to loan notes in 1 second. If you're going to invest in equity, be prepared to lose the cash you're investing. And assume some of your investments will go bad. So look at the portfolio of investments and the returns you're earning across them. Try to spread your investments across different people and different projects and different timelines so that you can smooth out the bumps. Now, if anyone's offering you a loan note, I would argue that it's difficult to legally do that. So by definition, I don't care whether you have security or PG, they may be committing a crime anyways, whether they know it or not. Loan notes are somewhat a flag, or they're an amber flag that you have a possible illegal structure. So be very careful about assuming security is, you know, you're good. Could be just completely bogus.
Yeah. Well, the last thing on this before we then move to wrap up, and with one more thing to discuss, but if we look at the capital stack, which you and I talk a lot with you know, clients of ours, and we're doing consultancy, things like that. If you're an equity investor and you're behind senior debt from a bank, that's maybe lending out at 65% potentially, and then there may even be some mezz or stretch senior or a loan note in place, and then comes the equity. I mean, it's somewhat simplistic. I'm not saying it's as simple as just across the board, but in my opinion, in many occasions, if that project absolutely goes horribly wrong and everything hits the fan, I mean, by the time the first charge takes their bit, and maybe the second charge or the mezz takes their bit, I mean, what is there left for the equity investors anyway if they had a PG or they had a third layer of security? I mean, I just think in most circumstances there won't be anything left to go after.
Yeah, and when you evaluate the LTVs, the loan to value of the various loans, you also have to assume once you're in default interest rates kick in, lawyers come in, you have to pay for those lawyers. There's court costs. There may be, the project may have its own lawyer. So suddenly there's a whole bunch of costs that will never be on the project plan. And all those costs are going to be jump in front of you as the, if you're further down the food chain, all these people can get in front of you on the food chain. So by the time you get to the table, if there are any crumbs left, I'd be surprised in some of these deals.
Yeah. So of course, neither of us are attempting to give any financial advice. We're just looking at different attitudes, but this is why I love equity and why I started an equity platform rather than a debt platform, is that if someone is really motivated to have security, well, then you probably need to be at first charge. Otherwise you're really, you know, what's your second charge actually worth? And therefore, if security isn't your main driver and you are looking for higher returns but understanding the risks, well then equity makes sense. And that's just my opinion. So the last thing then today is our fundraiser live bootcamp, John, that we have for the 15th, 16th, 17th of March. It's brilliant to see those who have already booked on this. This is the second one we've done. We did one in December. We had, I think it was 15 people who obviously paid to be there for 3 days. And this is really a full-on boot camp. It's interactive. Just maybe take a minute and explain what we are offering on this and what are the benefits to any fundraisers, property developers, landlords that are wanting to raise funds legally.
Yeah, I mean, it's literally a workshop. So it's meant to be and will be and was 3 days to get your hands dirty, to roll up your sleeves, to get started with putting together your raise documents. If you have an immediate need, fine, you can work on that. If you don't have an immediate need, you can work on some case study materials so that you can start building your investor list, or as I think David likes to call it, your investor tribe in advance of your next raise. We're primarily focused or heavily focused on people who have already done a few deals. They know how to make money and they realize how much money they're leaving on the table each time they can't find the funds to secure the next deal. So if you're leaving money on the table, if you're having misfires that you know how to find a good deal, you found a good deal, and you're kicking yourself because you've lost 5-6 figures worth of future profits because you just couldn't get it over the line, we want to talk to you.
Yeah, and it's I think one of the benefits as well, John, that we find, as well as the information that we impart in terms of compliance and deal structuring and brand building and all of that, is the value of the interaction with other attendees and the ability to get questions answered. So what was remarkable the last boot camp, when we maybe after a break or after lunch, we left open for questions. I mean, we had to stop those because there were so many questions, people wanting to, to pick our brains on things, and particularly regarding specific situations that they actually had on a deal. There's huge value in being able to not just get the benefit of our experience and knowledge, but even others who are there attending, and that pooled knowledge provides a lot of value.
It does. I mean, it's also a possible JV with people. They're at different phases, they're at different points in their opportunities, and there may be some collaborations that can come out of it. So there's definitely synergy. At the same time, it's a workshop. It's not, we're not just going to sort of fire hose you with a bunch of slides. This is all about how it applies to someone, what they are going to do to move the dial.
Yeah, so it's 15th, 16th, 17th of March. It runs from 10 a.m. to 7 p.m. There's obviously breaks for lunch and things like that, but it's a pretty full-on intense. You do need to have your sort of diary cleared. You can't kind of be on this and at the same time, carrying on with the business and trying to send emails on the side. You got to be engaged. You got to be focused. You got to be, to get the benefit. You've got to be there in the moment, and that's where the value is. So you can go onto the link there. It's at the bottom. You can screen grab that, or take an image, whatever you want to do. It's £297 for the 3-day workshop, and you can go on and secure your seat from there. Next week, we're actually going to bring on a few people who attended the last boot camp we did, just to hear from them and the benefits they felt they received. So we're going to have a few people like that. We'll also have a special guest next week. I'm delighted to be bringing on Andrew McDonald, and we'll be saying a few things about Andrew next week. He's involved in Tandem Real Estate, also has a new brand he started, Credo Living, along with some associates. And you can see he's a commercial property expert. He's got some really strong opinions on repurposing commercial property to help with this gap in the housing market. He's also a coach and mentor, so a really knowledgeable person regarding the world of commercial and property in the UK housing. So next week we're going to be hearing from Andrew, so really looking forward to that. So that is us, John, for today. So thank you very much, everyone who's joined us. Any last minute comments, John?
No, I think I'm good.
Yep, and I say really looking forward to next week then, just hearing from some people. And I think someone's just found something in the Q&A, which we'll look at quickly before we finish.
Okay, just thanking us for doing such a great job.
Brilliant. Okay, well, listen, next week then, tune in to hear Andrew McDonald and some people who are on our boot camp. Thank you for today, and have a great rest of Thursday. All the best, everyone. Good luck. Bye-bye.